What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the vlog. No, we are not outside working on a deck or a patio today. We're actually at my house and we're doing this accent wall in our nursery. So this is a fun little DIY project. So I'm gonna show you how to take it from this to this. All right, it's not gonna be quite that easy, but this is a project that you can accomplish in one weekend, very inexpensive, and it makes a huge impact. So I'll walk you through the whole thing. Stay tuned. Instead of my sidekick, Pat, we have my wife, Sarah, today. She's gonna be helping a little bit. And Ziggy. All I've done to prep this wall so far is I've taken off a little piece of cove molding. This was on top of our baseboard. There's still a 1x4 sitting here, but we're gonna leave that because we're actually building out the wall with 3/4 inch MDF sheets. That's gonna give it a little bit more of a substantial feel, so it's gonna stick off the wall a little bit more, and it's very paintable. So this whole surface is gonna be MDF with 1x4 pine trim on top, and it's gonna create a really smooth finish. So now that I've got that off, we're ready to get started, and we're actually gonna start with the wallpaper. I'm starting with the wallpaper because I wanna have that sit behind all of our trim. That way I don't have to have a perfectly clean cut on the bottom. It's just gonna make it a lot easier. I'm not a wallpaper hanger, and this is the wallpaper that we're gonna be hanging. Pretty cool little celestial pattern on there. It's actually just a peel and stick, so it's made for DIY type of applications. It's really apparently easy to apply. We'll see how that works, but you're definitely gonna want a hand on this. So Sarah's gonna help me, and we're gonna get it going on there. So we got both of these sheets up here and it looks really cool. It's a little bit harder than they made it seem in that YouTube video, but we got it done. We had to call in my father-in-law because Sarah's arms were getting tired, but, right babe?
Right.
What I did find was that a spackle knife was a little bit too sharp, so I just used a credit card and that helped smooth it out, get some of the air bubbles out. But I'm glad it's over because that was kind of a pain. Now I can get on to some of the trim work, and you can see at the top, I left it a little bit long, so I'm gonna cut that with a razor blade, same thing on the sides, and that's why I wanted to put that up first so that I didn't have to line up the top and bottom at the same time. The bottom of that wallpaper is gonna be covered by our trim, so I think this part's gonna go a lot better. There were a couple small spots, like right here, where it didn't totally get rid of the bubble. It made this little crease. I found it really hard to get it up there without getting any of those, but when you step back, they pretty much totally disappeared.
It's beautiful.
Thanks for helping.
You're welcome.
You're gonna help take care of this kid though, right?
I'm growing him.
All right, so now that we have our wallpaper up, our next step is putting up the sheets of 3/4 inch MDF. And what I wanna do is just find where the studs are at so I can mark them out and make sure that MDF is going right into studs. So I actually already found where the studs are, but all I did was started in both corners because a lot of times one side is gonna be 16 inches off the corner, you're gonna find a stud. I actually didn't in both of those corners, but there is an outlet here. And you know there's gonna be a stud on either side of that, so I drilled in right here, found a stud, and then I can measure 16 inches off of that, and that's gonna be my stud layout. So what I'm gonna do is mark that on this bottom piece of 1x4 so that when I put the MDF up here, I know where all the studs are at, and I can make sure that I'm hitting something solid. I've got the wall stud layout marked on this bottom 1x4. Now I can install the MDF, but this is a 12-foot wall and I got 4x8 sheets of MDF. So what I wanted to do, which I did this a little bit earlier, I played around with some different configurations of what that 1x4 trim going vertical is gonna be spaced at. So I have that figured out. And what I wanna do is make sure that that seam of MDF, because we're gonna have to put two pieces, is gonna be behind one of those pieces of 1x4. And to figure out my layout for those vertical 1x4s, all I did was measure the entire wall, and then I divided it by how many I wanted to put in there, and then I can mark out where each one's gonna go. And if you want, what I did was mark it out on the wall so I can step back, take a look at it, and kind of play around with it. Another thing that you want to think about, if you have any outlets, you want to make sure that none of your verticals are going to be hitting this outlet. So I've got that figured out, and I know that I need to cut one sheet of MDF at 92 inches and the other one at 46.5. I just marked it on the wall here. This is all going to get covered. That's what I like to do, write your measurements down, that way you don't forget them. So 92 and 46.5, and I can get them up there, and then we can move on to some of the trim. And the reason that we're using that 3/4 inch MDF against the wall is really just to give it that nice heavy look. It's gonna make it stick off the wall a little bit more. It's also gonna make our sill on top a little bit deeper, which I think is gonna look nice. And like I said before, it's a really nice paintable surface, so we'll get a nice clean finish. What's Ziggy barking at?
The neighbors 3 houses down are getting something from UPS.
Oh, great. That's gonna be fun when there's a baby in here.
Sleeping.
Yeah. All right, I got the MDF sheets cut and in here. You definitely want to have a better setup than 2 coolers to make your cuts on, but all my tools are in the trailer, so gotta make do. But now we're gonna get them installed, and we're gonna just set them right on top of that 1x4 that's on the ground. But we do want to check to make sure that the top of that is level, because our sill is gonna sit right on top of it. So I'm gonna get one side installed, and then I'm gonna check it. We might have to shim it a little bit, make sure that everything is nice and flat so that when our sill goes on top, it looks nice and straight. Can you go mount me?
Okay. What's up?
Phew. All right, I need to move it over. So we got the first piece up now. Second piece, you can see we have this outlet right here. What we're gonna have to do is actually extend that outlet so that instead of sitting flush with this wall, it's sitting flush with this 3/4 inch MDF. So we're gonna have to cut out that hole in this next piece. So the second piece, I cut about 1/4 inch short. You don't wanna have it super tight. The sides are gonna be covered with trim, so you're not gonna see any of that anyway. And we don't want it to be like we're jamming it in there and it's really hard to fit. So cut it about 1/4 inch short. But I'm gonna butt it tight to this so I can get a nice measurement. And I got about 14.5 and 16.5 from this left side. Now I have to measure the vertical. Here we're at 7 inches on the bottom. And about 10 5/8 on the top. So I'm gonna mark that on this piece here. Then I can cut that out with a jigsaw. Shouldn't be too hard. Definitely need a new blade on this thing, but got that out. And what you want to make sure of is that your cut's bigger than this outlet, but smaller than the switch plate. So switch plate will cover up everything. We're not gonna have any gaps there. So I just pulled this outlet away from the wall a tiny bit, and now I'm gonna have to get the piece on there and kind of wiggle this through the hole, and then that'll get mounted back on top. We wanna make sure that these screws are still accessible through the hole that we make in that MDF, but it's not so big that these little tabs can't sit on top. So we cut it right about here so that this is gonna sit on there really nice and flat, and it'll look really nice. Now we're on to some of the really cool detail stuff, and we're gonna start building out those boxes, the raised panels over top of this MDF. So everything's gonna be really precise now, and I'm gonna show you how I figured that out and where everything's gonna go, because these are our final marks. We're gonna start cutting things, installing it, and that's where it's gonna stay. So gotta make sure this is right. I'm really big on layout and making sure everything is spaced out perfectly. So it's something that a lot of times you won't pick up if you're off, say, an inch or something on your last panel, but it's something I always like to pay really close attention to, because I just like everything to match up really nicely. So what I'm doing is marking out the end of that first 1x4, and then I'm gonna measure across the side. I already did that, it's 134 inches, and then I'm gonna divide that by 6. We're gonna have a total of 7 pieces of trim vertical, which creates 6 boxes. So 134 divided by 6 is 22 1/3. I always like to start at the end of that first piece of trim instead of in the corner of the wall, because it can throw off the layout a little bit. So if I measure from there and I just make my marks at 22 1/3, my last mark is gonna be tight to that wall, and everything is gonna be on the other side of it. So it's just like how you lay out joists, studs, everything like that. You're gonna mark it out on 16s, and then it's gonna go on a certain side of that mark. So I'm gonna pull from that side, and that's gonna be the right side of each piece of trim. So I'm gonna mark that out now. Now that we're ready to get to installing some of this trim, what I have to do first is cut out this existing baseboard on this wall to make sure that our bottom piece slides right in there and it's not gonna impede it. So all I'm gonna do is take the material that we're gonna use here, make a mark, and I can use the oscillating tool, cut that out. The trim that we're actually gonna install here is a 1x8. So we're gonna install that first, and then a 1x4 goes on top of that, which is gonna look like this baseboard continues. And then we still have that about 3.5 inch reveal for all sides of the panels that we're installing. And now our trim will slide right in there like that. It's gonna look really nice and tight. Now it's time to install those vertical pieces, which is gonna give it that paneled look. So all I'm gonna do is measure from the baseboard to the bottom of that top trim, and I wanna make sure that each cut is really tight. We don't want any gapping there. So if anything, cut it a tiny bit long, force it in there, or you can cut it a little bit shorter, but you don't wanna cut it too short, and then you're left with a big gap. So we're gonna get these installed, then it's really gonna start coming together. I'm pretty excited. So I've got all of these vertical pieces installed now, and the last thing that we need to do is put this cove molding. This is the one that I took off. I got some new pieces. That's gonna go underneath this sill, and then we're also gonna do it at the bottom on the baseboard. So a couple more cuts, and then from there, it's really just paint, caulk, and all that kind of stuff. So we're getting really, really close now.